Let me say a quick word about the horrendously low savings rate. In America today, I've mentioned this before, but a few extra points need to be made here. You must realize that the bankers want only to sequester every physical form of so-called money, converting it into instruments they can completely control to create out-of-thin-air debt. Oh, but they call it money, don't they? Plastic purchase conveyance, digital brokerages that can evaporate what we call savings by pressing enter, then Wall Street bankruptcy, siphoning up the remaining scant 3% of coin or paper currency left in the Western system, which of course is the world system based on the US dollar dominance. The banks don't want savings at all. The proof is what they pay for interest. Savings increases economic deflation based on this jerry-rigged debt-chasing debt system. It's much easier to steal equity in the stock markets, CDOs, bonds, even the once sacred money market funds. This generates massive profits and bonuses for the 3% elite. Inflation is their friend. 3 to 6%, that is, steadily eroding consumer buying power, encouraging, really, embarrassing people to borrow more. Inevitably, as perverted as it seems, loan defaults work in their favour, a tool used to redistribute the remaining balance sheets of working America's savings and investments vehicles. They know they will be taxpayer-bailed. This one-sided deterioration of our living standards. This arrangement essentially assures a tight control over the working force with no wage races. Thus the elite pool the investments of escalating thin-air debt and money creation and net profit interest wealth for themselves. All while the rest of the poor stiffs who feed the ever-ballooning wealth of the elite lose more and more buying power, wage appreciation and savings. Yet what the elite don't realize is that they are actually undermining their own system due to the workers' inability to pay for capital goods and services. Also, it's no wonder anyone running for office extolling the Wall Street, Washington, D.C. corrupt swamp while blaming vulnerable segments of the population are feverishly supported and elected. No fault, simply an observation. As such, we're in the final stages of complete, unsustainable, ever-increasing debt. It's easy to see. Look at the balance sheets of all the world's central banks created out of thin air since the 2008 crash. All it's going to take is one bump in the road, and Lehman Brothers will look like a course in Economics 101, where the less you understand the layered, crumbling, top-heavy system, the more destructive will be the outcome. That's why Bitcoin poses such a foundational threat to the elite's monopolistic, greedy grip on debt manufacture and flow. This path is unsustainable, and savings, which allays debt, will only expedite the decay. The system sustains itself on generating war. War dynamically increases the volume of debt. A bunch of zeros after prime numbers, for example, Iraq, Syria, a couple of examples of many. This is all utterly terminal and catastrophic, ladies and gentlemen. Most defined benefit pension plans are nothing but Pozi schemes. Plans are now unravelling because of demographics. An increasing number of retirees needing untenable returns are supported by fewer and fewer people putting money into the system. Democrats sponsored a bailout scheme. It's doubtful whether it will pass. Senator Sherrod Brown plans to introduce legislation that would allow struggling multi-employer pension funds to borrow from the US Treasury in order to remain solvent. The bill is co-sponsored by Tim Ryan and could be introduced as early as next week. It would create a new office within the Treasury Department called the Pension Rehabilitation Administration. The funds would come from the sale of Treasury-issued bonds to financial institutions. The pension funds could borrow for 30 years at low interest rates. One restriction for borrowers is that they could not make risky investments. Quoting an analysis from Mr. Brown's office, the bill would also fund a program at the Benefit Pension Guarantee Corp to finance any remaining needs of pension plans borrowing from the new program. Any money needed from the PBGC would be a tiny fraction of what it would otherwise be on the hook for if Congress fails to act. End of quote. Brown told a group of retired Teamsters in Ohio on Monday that the bill will be out shortly. The bill begins, "Pension bailout bill to be introduced this week." Said Brown, quote, "It's bad enough that Wall Street squanders workers' money, and it's worse that the government that's supposed to look out for these folks is trying to break the promise made to these workers. Not on our watch. We won't allow that to happen." End of quote. No, instead, what will happen under his watch is that funds collected from tax-paying Americans will be spent to satisfy the ridiculous retirement promises and obligations made over the past few decades, and while the immediate recipients of the funds, i.e. those looking at near-term retirement, will be made whole, everyone else, i.e. taxpayers, will lose. Now that the machinery for pension bailouts is finally in motion, we look forward to the next and possibly final tear in the American social fabric, that between workers who can't wait to retire to the generous pension promises and all those other unlucky taxpayers who will have to fund these promises. It's important to note that the bill addresses private pensions covered by the Pension Benefit Guarantee Corporation, not public pensions. I've talked about private pensions haircuts several times. There are over 200,000 retirees backed by 60,000 or so employees contributing to the plan. Moreover, the plan assumes 6% returns at a time when 10-year treasuries are 2.4%. This is a Ponzi scheme about to go bust. The only way demographically challenged plans can achieve the necessary returns is via leverage. That's precisely what Democrats Brown and Ryan propose, perhaps without realizing it, perhaps not caring. Regardless, borrowing money to invest in stocks is the equivalent of using margin. If the stock market heads lower, losses will be massive, requiring more and more funding. Margin funding can backfire unless there's an infinite pool of money available to borrow. The fact that two financial illiterates or Ponzi scheme backers propose a bill doesn't mean the bill will ever see the light of day. I doubt Republicans would back such a scheme, and I doubt it will ever make it out of committee. I also think the Fed would weigh in negatively on such a scheme. Let's assume I'm wrong on both counts. If they do pass such a scheme, bear in mind that it is for a limited situation, at least for now. Then it's nearly guaranteed to blow up in proportion to the amount of leverage used. If so, it's highly unlikely the program would be expanded to cover public pensions. I don't think this is the final scheme for the reasons I've already stated, but it is the opening salvo. Expect to see even more creative ideas when public union pensions such as CalPERS blow sky high. What ultimately happens may depend on which party is in office when the Pozi scheme is widely recognised for what it is.